Hey, howdy and hello, folks. Welcome back into T1A, Tier 1 Ascension. I am your host, Tank. Today I'm going through part 2 of where are these rookies going in startup drafts. Let's get into it. All right, welcome in. We are going through part 2 of our where are these rookies going at in startup drafts. Kind of taking a look at kind of the hype that's going on with some of these rookies, and to me it's a little extreme, but we're going to be looking at a player where their ADP is and maybe some players that I'd rather take instead of them to do a startup. We are looking at Dynasty, PPR, Superflex, so trying to keep that in mind as we're looking at these. But the first player that I'm going to bring up on the board here, first up here is Devon Achane. We are looking at sleeper ADP of 97. So going in round 8, I get Achane's appeal. He's a big play guy, speedster. So any ball that he touches can essentially become a touchdown. So that's always a great factor to have. But currently at his pick, you could get Devon Achane, or you can pick up Keenan Allen or Deontay Johnson. And I would much rather have those other two guys than Achane. Let's take a look at both sides of the coin here. So Achane in college, he was averaging 7 yards a carry in 2021, 5.6 yards per carry. So he doesn't need an exorbitant amount of touches to be an efficient player. That's a good factor for where he's at. He's likely in a big timeshare. He scored double-digit touchdowns. He was also the kick returner for the team, which he had have a return for a touchdown last year. So he can thrive in a low-touch role, very likely in the committee in Miami, and he'll likely be the kick returner, which that doesn't receive a lot of work nowadays with the new rules. The more research that I've done on Achane, it makes me think more and more of Warrick Dunn. So Warrick Dunn was reported to have a 4.28 40. He was 5'9", 180 pounds. Warrick Dunn ended up playing 12 years in the NFL. Smaller frame guy, was able to have a nice long career. Other similarities between the two is they both can catch passes, not supremely talented at it, or really required to do so in their offense, but effective nonetheless, and home run hitters. So if they do get that ball, there's that chance that they could score. Looking over more of Warrick's stuff, he had 5 seasons where he rushed over 1,000 yards. He finished 9 of his 12 seasons over 1,000 yards combined, and 2 of those he had over 900 yards. So talk about a highly efficient player. He wasn't reaching that upper echelon of like super elite, but he was a solid running back 2, sometimes running back 1, depending on the season. And he's just solid throughout his whole career. With that, I can see that being a plausible career arc for Achane. But, with right now, this year, you got to remember that he's sharing it with 2 aged veterans, trying to protect Tua probably from another hip injury. They're likely going to keep those other 2 guys in for pass protection. So that might limit some more touches that Achane sees this year. Trying to balance out this situation here, let's look at some of the bad stuff. Achane's not Warrick Dunn. He just reminded me of him. There's some similarities, but he's not going to see 250 plus touches a year. He doesn't have first round draft capital. He was picked in the 3rd, and he doesn't have the same kind of college production that Warrick Dunn did. He was the guy when he was at Florida State. He's going to start out as a 3rd rotational piece in the backfield. He's likely the starting kick returner. So there's obviously some concern about his backfield mate's possibility of injury. We saw Jeff Wilson and Mostert miss some time, but we also saw them be quite fantastic in Miami. So it's likely that Achane is going to be more gadgeted in, but they're going to be plays that are designed for him. and really focus on what he has or him being a distraction. But if it's a passing down, there's always going to be the likeliness of checking out to Tyreek or Jalen Waddle, and that could take some of the A-Chain's touches. We can look at the chart here. This is Warwick Dunn's career. You can see the amount of touches, the volume, the rushes. I mean, he wasn't, from what I'm seeing in there, the numbers here, he wasn't the goal line back. He probably had to score from a little bit longer out. But you look at some of those long plays, even in his 30s, he had a 90-yard play. Some 70s, 60s, like Work Done had big play potential. That's what A-Chain's going to get as well, but it's not going to be to the same amount of volume. So it's hard to get him into like a running back one solidly at any time in his career. We're looking at Raheem Mostert on the left and Jeff Wilson on the right. So we're looking at Mostert having a 4.4 40. Most likely Jeff Wilson's around the 4.5 range. So they're not super speedy. So A-Chain can be a little bit more of a speedy punch. But these guys dominated games last year. 181 touches, 176 touches. I mean, where else are they going to fit HA into this except for gadget plays, except for specified role plays? The other path for success for A-Chain is injury, which we know these guys are both injury prone. So this could be a way that he gets on the field, but there is also Myles Gaskin still there, and the offense still can be predicated on passing. The other thing that I wanted to look at for A-Chain's plausibility here, the schedule. These guys have some of the toughest schedule, I would think, that's kind of out there right now. They are going to be going through their own division, which is the AFC East, of the Bills, the Jets, and the Patriots. So those three teams, great defenses, always. They're also going to be facing the AFC West, which has the Chargers, the Broncos, the Raiders, and Chiefs, which the Raiders is, I would say, the weakest out of all of them, and they don't get to play them until week 11. And they also face the NFC East. Now, granted, having the Giants on week 5, they still got a decent defense. Panthers week 6, still a decent defense. But you look at the rest of that schedule to start the season: the Chargers, Patriots, Broncos, Bills, and then you have the Giants, Panthers, and then the Eagles, Patriots again, then the Chiefs. Like your first couple of weeks there, they are just getting beat up by great defenses. Not just good, but great. Some of the top probably defenses in the league. So tough schedule, a lot of strong defenses. It's going to be tough for a rookie to get out there when there's so much pass protection that's going to be needed. Dolphins really can't afford Tua to get hurt or a concussion again. They're going to need to protect him. And having A-Chain out there with his smaller frame isn't going to block at Oliver. He's not going to be able to stop the main pass rusher defensive ends that are coming off 300 plus pounds at his 189 or 188 pound frame. It's just not plausible. He might be a speed bump, but he is not going to stop them. With their schedule, with the limited role that he's going to take, I'm hesitant to take him that early in my startup. Now, let's take a look at the other options that I'd rather draft instead of gambling on A-Chain. Start with Keenan Allen. Yes, I remember that it's a dynasty. I know. To me, a dynasty is a 2 to 3 year window. I like to get players that have long-standing values beyond that, but you should be really looking to win now. So if I'm in a startup and I just paid to get into this league, isn't it better to win in year 1 and 2, and you're looking to retool and rebuild in years 3, 4, 5, versus somebody else trying to win in years 3 and 4 because they went super young and you've already got your money back and now you're playing for free? That is the plan here for drafting Keenan Allen over A-Chain. You can't predict injuries, which, yeah, we know Keenan's been injured here and there, but we can view production and we can view involvement. The target share it was in Keenan's favor once he was healthy last year. Keenan hit 14 targets in 3 different games, and he ended up finishing 15th in overall fantasy points per game, despite only playing 10 games. And one of those games that counted, he only had 2 targets, and that was in the middle of his injury run. So he was injured, tried to come back, didn't work out, and then he was injured for a couple more weeks, and then he was fully back. We look at this, we see the comparison there between Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Keenan is still Herbert's alpha. He was targeted more than Mike Williams in all but one game when Keenan was healthy. Keenan is an absolute solid lock for wide receiver 2 and could possibly be better. I would rather have a solid lock at wide receiver 2 than a potential RB3 who hopefully could get to an RB2 potential at some point. All right, last guy, Deontay. If you haven't checked out my video already, I released a video earlier kind of about players that I'm interested in and picking up, and Kenny Pickett was on that list. And the reason for some of that is because of the receiving core that is there. He's got guys that have potential all over the place. So in his backfield, he's got Najee and Jaylen Warren. Najee is going to be your pounding back. Jaylen Warren is going to be more of the explosive guy. Both guys can catch passes. Freiermuth is there, obviously. He's going to take up short area targets and zone fill. You've got Pickens, who's just an alpha that can play and attack you anywhere on the field, downfield, sideline. He's not the super crisp runner of routes, but he will catch everything that's thrown his way. Calvin Austin's going to be back and healthy. He's going to be that deep speedster that kind of takes the top off defenses. I don't think he poses a super big threat, but it's going to be one of those players that if you don't pay enough attention to him, he can probably burn you deep on a couple of touchdowns here and there. And then there is Deontay. They're solid route runner and target getter because he gets open. He's also going to be the QB safety net. Between him and Freiermuth, I think Deontay is just a little more crisp at running routes, so he's going to get a little bit more of that target share, which brings me to a surprising stat that I came across when we started talking about Deontay, and that's going to be right over here. He was number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, number 7, well, tied for 7th in total targets last year. Total targets. Now, they weren't the most accurate because he was getting passes from Trubinsky and from Pickett, but this is going to improve as Pickett comes into his second year. He averaged, a 66% average on his targets is not bad. It's pretty good. If Deontay can see that same kind of volume this year, it's going to keep him in that wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 range, and it will just depend on if he can actually score a touchdown this year or not. The other 2 stats we have here are the 2022 season and the 2021 season. And you can just see Deontay gets targets. I even had pulled up his rookie year. He was still seeing 6 to 9 targets a game in his rookie season. So he's done nothing but evolve, and the Steelers love him. And you know this because he's got an extension, which is a rarity for a Steelers wide receiver to get an extension. So he is looking to be a Steeler for this year and possibly next year. It's just a 2-year extension, but that's pretty good. With Deontay having been at 7th in targets last year, he was 13th in receptions. It didn't prove to be a great year because he didn't score touchdowns. I still don't think that he's going to have a lot, but obviously there's supposed to be a positive regression away from 0. I think he'd get to 3, maybe 5, and that's going to be good enough to push him up the ranks and keep him solidly in your wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 3 spot, or if you're running just 2 wide receivers, your first flex. Again, Deontay will be targeted. His role is still valuable, and he's still a solid starter on your roster. Where I view A-Chain as a flex player at best, unless everyone else in Miami gets hurt, Deontay is still going to be a starter, and for me, that's just going to leave between Keenan, Deontay, and A-Chain. I'm going to take Keenan first, Deontay second, and A-Chain last at that pick. Just to start your roster off in a much better spot than hoping that a running back who's a speedster could be great, could be good, but the role and the situations around it say that it's probably going to have to be next year before you can expect a big breakout. I still don't mind picking up A-Chain because he's going to have that big playability, and that could be value for your roster in specific weeks. Next up, we have CJ Stroud. He is going ADP of 39, so he's getting picked up in round 4. A couple quarterbacks that are going after him in the draft, who I much prefer their upside, would be Tua and Daniel Jones. To me, there is a big discrepancy between what you should expect out of CJ Stroud and what you should expect out of the other two quarterbacks. Let's start at the beginning and work our way through this here. Stroud's getting a lot of hype because he's the new thing. He was the second overall pick, which is nice because you can expect he's going to be the starter for 2 to 3 years before they try to move on. I also understand that he did not score well in the Wonderlic test, which is kind of like that football IQ type test. I don't think it's nearly as imperative to a quarterback unless the scheme of the offense is super intricate. There are historic quarterbacks that didn't score well on this test. Dan Marino, Jim Kelly, Donovan McNabb, they all had low scores and did just fine. So that's not why I'm low on him. I'm not worried about that. I think the system that's being brought over by Bobby Slovic and coming over from the Niners with D'Amico Ryan will bring, his 6 years of experience, whether Slovic is running part or all of the offensive scheme. He's going to bring that to the Texans. It's likely going to be passer friendly, limited reads, utilization of multiple levels and play action, and kept simple but effective for a rookie. So you think of like Jimmy G, Brock Purdy, like those guys are not super dynamic passers, but in that offensive scheme, they worked well because they weren't expected to do a whole lot. They would get the ball to the player and let them go, which that's kind of the other problem. You've got a very muddied up receiving core here that's granted loaded with potential, but it's still unproven receivers and an aged Bobby Trees. We've got Nico Collins, John Mechie, Xavier Hutchinson, Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz. That's what the Texans are feeling as their receiving core. You also have Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary to headline the backfield. Like I said, there's a lot of potential, but is it good? So trying to compare the Texans' weapons to, what Tua has, or trying to compare like what's going to keep Daniel Jones in the top 12, which is his rushing, compared to what Stroud does, I just don't see it. So let's first talk about Tua here. I understand Tua has some wariness about picking him up because of his concussions and his injuries, but up until the point where he received multiple concussions, he was having a phenomenal season. Finished a quarterback 2, quarterback 1, quarterback 4, quarterback 3, multiple touchdowns, his 6 week 2 there. Just great games. So despite there being some issue with that, he still had a great solid season. If Tua is able to resume even 80% of what he was doing in the first half of the season in 2022, and he's able to do that all season long, there's no reason why Tua won't be a top 10 quarterback, whether it's 4-point or 6-point per passing touchdown. I've already spoken on the defensive schedule for the Dolphins, and to me it just says passing is going to happen early and often, so I want a piece of that. So the volume that Tua will probably be passing, and the volume, the yardage, all of that is much more than what we can expect out of a rookie quarterback, and the likely limited volume or because of scheme and opportunity for his first year or two. Unless he's an outlier like Joe Burrow. It's not expected, but you also got to remember Joe Burrow had T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd his first year, and then his second year he had Jamar Chase added to that. You can't expect Stroud to come out and be this elite gunslinger when you have so much unknown and unproven in his wide receiving core. All right, talk about some Danny Dimes here. So Daniel Jones getting re-signed over Saquon and still being paired with Dayball are huge factors to me looking at this upcoming season. The biggest factor that hurt fantasy managers with Danny Dimes was the issue of turnovers his first couple seasons, mostly the fumbles, because anytime he'd rush, it was likely he's going to fumble, or it felt like it at least. This has almost been completely eradicated now, as Jones was only responsible for 11 turnovers last year, 5 interceptions, and 6 fumbles. Year before that, he had 14, 7 fumbles, 7 interceptions. His control of the things that he can control, his turnovers, he's mitigated down to a very small aspect of the game. We have to look at what else is he going to do. He's not going to be an elite passer beyond like 3,500 yards. That kind of seems like the ceiling from where he can go for passing, but the rushing baseline, that threshold that keeps him still higher, especially in 4-point per passing touchdowns, is going to be his rushing ability. Last year, he hit the 700-yard mark, and we really look for QBs to hit 400, 450 plus to keep him in that top 12 range. There's nothing that says that he can't surpass 400, get 3,000 plus, passing yards. And then he accounted for 22 total touchdowns last year, 15 passing, 7 rushing. With the amount of players changed out and added to this team this year, as far as the receivers and Waller, this should be closer to an overall finish of 30 touchdowns and still, again, adding to his little bit of a baseline to keep him in that top 12. So as far as the team around him, their proven work and high potential output, I have Tua and Daniel Jones over CJ Stroud and would happily take them to start my fantasy squad. Looks like that's all I've got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed. If you got time, throw me a like, subscribe to the channel, see if you want to see some more stuff from us, and hope you all have a great one.